I built my life on a simple truth. Loyalty was the ultimate currency. In business, in friendship, in marriage. For 15 years, I believed my wife, Isabelle, and my best friend, Gabriel, shared that truth. We were a trio, an unshakable triangle. Gabriel and I founded Apex Consulting straight out of business school. He was the charismatic front man with the Midas touch with clients. I was the strategic backbone who built the systems that made us rich. Isabelle was our glue, our heart, the brilliant interior designer who crafted our offices and our homes into spaces of beauty and calm. Our success felt like a shared temple we'd constructed together. The first crack appeared not in a shout, but in a frequency only I could hear, a shift in the data. I was reviewing the Q3 financials late one night, something I did the way other people meditate. A series of irregular expenses, small but consistent, caught my eye. They were coded to business development, elite client relations, a category Gabriel controlled. The amounts weren't alarming, but the vendors were. Boutique hotels in Sonoma, a private vineyard tour company, a Michelin-starred restaurant in the city Isabelle had been raving about for weeks. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my skull. Coincidence was a statistical improbability I didn't believe in. I began to observe, not as a husband or a friend, but as an analyst assessing a hostile takeover. The clues were subtle, but damning. Isabelle started wearing a new, dizzyingly expensive perfume, Jasmine Noir, on days she had client meetings that coincided with Gabriel's networking dinners. Their laughter, once a familiar, comfortable sound in our living room, developed a new private cadence, a shared rhythm that excluded me. Gabriel, who used to slap my back and call me brother, now held my gaze a fraction of a second too long, his smile not reaching his eyes. The confirmation came from an offhand remark by our assistant, Chloe, a sharp-eyed woman who owed her job to me. "It's so great that Izzy and Gabe are getting the Vancorp account to bond over," she said, sorting mail. "They've been grinding so hard on that pitch together. Late nights, weekend brainstorming at his penthouse. You must be proud." At his penthouse. The words hung in the air. Isabelle had told me those weekends were design retreats for a demanding, anonymous client. A cold, crystalline clarity settled over me. This wasn't just an affair, it was a collaboration. They were building something together, and I was being quietly excised from the blueprint. Instead of confronting them, I dove deeper into the numbers. I used my administrative access to trace the elite client relations funds further. They led to a shell company, Elysian Ventures, registered in Delaware. The sole signatory was Gabriel. Payments from Apex were being funneled there, then dispersed to the luxury vendors. He wasn't just wooing my wife, he was funding their affair with our company's money. Our shared temple was being looted to build their secret garden. The personal betrayal was a white-hot knife, but the professional treason was a colder, more calculated insult. He was using the empire we built, the systems I designed, to bankroll his theft of my life. I found myself standing in the doorway of Isabelle's studio one evening. She was sketching, bathed in the golden hour light, a vision of focused creativity. She looked up, and for a fleeting second, before her warm mask slid into place, I saw it. A flicker of guilt, of distance, of someone already living a separate story. "Long day?" she asked, her voice smooth as polished stone. "The usual," I replied, my own voice perfectly steady. "Just making sure the foundation is solid. You know me, always checking the load-bearing walls." She smiled, a beautiful, empty gesture. "That's why we need you. You're our foundation." Were. The past tense echoed in my mind. I was the foundation they were planning to build over. I walked away, the ghost in my own home. The grief was there, a vast, cold ocean, But rising from it was something else, a profound, focused fury. They saw me as the stable, boring architect, the human spreadsheet. They believed their passion, their connection, was a force of nature superior to my quiet loyalty. They were wrong. They had mistaken methodology for weakness. They had confused silence for oblivion. I would not rage. I would not plead. I would audit. I would assess their weaknesses, their vanities, their new shared empire built on my stolen capital and broken vows. And then, with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a spider, I would begin the process of dissolution. I would not break them apart. I would guide their own hands to do it, so that by the end, they
My
would look at
revenge
each other
would
not
be a
with
tax
passion,
audit of the
but with
soul,
the bitter,
and I was the
recriminatory
perfect
hatred
accountant.
of co-conspirators
I began
who
by
had blown up
fortifying
their
my
own
position.
dream.
At work,
The
I became
triangle
more
was
essential than
about to
ever,
become a
embedding
trap,
myself so
and I
deeply
was
into
the only
Apex's
one who
operational
knew where
code
the
that
pressure
removing
points
me
were.
would cause immediate, catastrophic failure. I automated key client reports only I could decipher, created strategic dependencies that looked like efficiency but were in fact delicate tripwires. Simultaneously, I started a parallel shadow investigation. I hired a discreet ex-military private investigator named Rhodes. His instructions were simple: document the timeline, the locations, the financial flow. I provided him with the Elysian Ventures paper trail. Within weeks, Rhodes delivered a dossier of cinematic clarity, time-stamped photos of them entering hotels, receipts from their lavish dinners, even a shot of Isabelle laughing in the passenger seat of Gabriel's new Ferrari, a car he'd bought using a performance bonus he'd awarded himself. The evidence was no longer for me, it was ammunition. But firing it directly was a fool's move. I needed their own hands on the trigger. I initiated Phase 1, financial destabilization. Using my access, I began to subtly alter Gabriel's cash flow. I didn't steal, I redirected. I scheduled critical vendor payments to be delayed by days, causing whispers about Apex's liquidity. I rerouted a major client's retainer into a holding account that required dual signatures, mine and Gabriel's, knowing he'd be too distracted to notice. The goal was to create a low-grade financial anxiety, a background hum of instability that would make him twitchy, prone to mistakes. For Isabelle, I crafted a more elegant psychological trap. I knew her vanity was her compass. I anonymously commissioned a popular cutting-edge design blog to run a feature on the hidden influences behind corporate aesthetics. The article, published a week later, lavishly praised Apex's offices, but attributed the vision and groundbreaking aesthetic solely to me, quoting my strategic understanding of spatial psychology. Isabelle was mentioned only in passing as the executing designer. The blog's comment section, subtly seeded, was filled with remarks like, "Finally, someone recognizes the genius behind the brand. The decor was just pretty wrapping." I left a printout of the article on her desk at home. When she found it, her face was a masterpiece of suppressed fury. "This is reductive. They completely missed the narrative," she hissed. "It's just a blog," I said mildly, not looking up from my book. "But they're right about one thing. The space does work. Productivity is up 19% since the redesign. The data doesn't lie." I weaponized my own bland rationality, knowing it infuriated her more than any accusation. The combined pressure began to warp their secret paradise. Gabriel, feeling the financial pinch from my silent manipulations, became less generous. The 5-star weekends became 4-star. Isabelle, stung by the perceived theft of her professional acclaim, grew more demanding, more expensive, as if trying to prove her worth through his spending. I overheard their first real argument via a listening device Rhodes had placed in Gabriel's penthouse study, a gift from the grateful client he'd never remember. "You said the Elysian account was flush," Isabelle's voice, sharp with panic. "It's a temporary cash flow issue, Izzy. The business is complex. You wouldn't understand." "Don't condescend to me.
I understand my Amex being declined at Bergdorf's." The crack was widening. They were starting to see the machinery behind the fantasy, and it was creaking. Phase 2 was social isolation. I began to gently, inexorably reclaim our shared social circle. I hosted a dinner party for our closest friends, a gathering Isabelle had to attend to keep up appearances. I was the warm, attentive host, steering conversations to fond memories of our early struggles, highlighting our triumphs, our jokes. I painted a portrait of a founding duo so inseparable that Gabriel, when he arrived late and flustered, seemed like an interloper. Friends asked him, "Everything okay, Gabe? You seem off." He was being subtly framed as the one who was drifting, not me. Then I delivered the masterstroke. I requested a confidential, brotherly lunch with Gabriel. At a quiet club downtown, I leaned in, my face a mask of concerned loyalty. "Gabriel, I need to talk to you about Isabelle." He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "What about her?" "I think she's having an affair," I said, pouring pure, agonized sincerity into my voice. "She's distant, secretive, spending money I can't account for. I'm worried she's being taken advantage of by someone, maybe someone from that Vancorp crowd." The psychological whiplash was beautiful to behold. His face cycled through shock, guilt, and a desperate scrambling calculation. He was now sitting across from the man he was betraying and consoling him about the very betrayal he was committing. "Ellie, no, I'm sure you're mistaken. She loves you. She's just stressed with work." His words were ash in his mouth. "You're a good friend, Gabe." I clapped him on the shoulder, my grip firm. "I knew I could come to you. You'll keep an eye out, won't you? For anyone inappropriate?" He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. I had made him my confidant in the investigation of his own crime. The cognitive dissonance would eat him alive. I left that lunch knowing the trap was set. The financial screws were tightening, their social refuge was vanishing, and now Gabriel was living a double game so intense that it would soon become unbearable. They were no longer lovers in a golden bubble. They were co-conspirators in a heist that was going catastrophically wrong. And the architect of the vault they'd tried to rob was now calmly, methodically changing the locks.
The trap was no longer a construct. It had become an environment. The air around Isabelle and Gabriel grew thick with paranoia and unspoken blame. My manipulations were the invisible weather system governing their crumbling paradise. I escalated the financial pressure. Using my control over Apex's ledgers, I initiated a scheduled internal audit of discretionary spending, focusing on the elite client relations budget. The process was meticulous, glacially slow, and completely legitimate. I made sure Gabriel received automated alerts daily. Query: vendor Venum Angelicum invoice number 4582, missing detailed receipt. Flag: expense category mismatch, vineyard tours under office supplies. Please justify. Each notification was a tiny bureaucratic pebble hitting the still surface of his confidence, sending ripples of anxiety through his days. He was a man who lived on grand gestures and smooth talk, now being slowly buried under an avalanche of petty accounting. His response was predictably reckless. To cover the discrepancies and maintain the lavish flow for Isabelle, he began diverting larger sums from a client escrow account. A short-term loan, he'd tell himself, to be replaced after the next big deal. But I owned the timeline of that deal, too. I delayed the closing documents, citing due diligence. The liquidity crisis I'd engineered was now real, and Gabriel was scrambling to plug holes in a dam that was cracking everywhere. Isabelle felt the squeeze immediately. The promised shopping spree to celebrate her feature, the one I'd sabotaged, was postponed.
A whispered argument in our kitchen, which I pretended not to hear through the baby monitor repurposed as a listening device, revealed the new tension. "You said it was handled, Gabe. This is embarrassing." "It is handled. It's a temporary glitch. Eli's being overly cautious with the stupid audit. He's choking the business with his spreadsheets." "Then unchoke it. I can't go back to living on a budget. Not after everything." Not after everything. The words hung between them. Their entire affair was built on an escape from the ordinary, from my methodical world. Now my world was the very thing strangling their fantasy. I introduced a new variable, competition. Through a blind shell corporation I'd established with Rhodes' help, I made an aggressive, unsolicited buyout offer for a small but prestigious design firm that Isabelle had long coveted as a competitor. The offer was deliberately leaked to the industry press. Overnight, Isabelle was faced with the nightmare of her professional arena being consolidated by a faceless entity. She was frantic, begging Gabriel to use his influence to find out who was behind the bid and stop it. Gabriel, already drowning, had no bandwidth to fight a phantom corporate raider. His helplessness in the face of this new threat shattered her image of him as a powerful protector. The man who was supposed to be her upgrade was now just another source of failure. The final stroke was social, and it was delivered with surgical cruelty. I revived an old tradition, the annual Apex Founders Gala, a black tie event we'd let lapse in recent years. I took charge of the planning, invoking nostalgia. The theme was The Foundation, a celebration of our enduring partnership. I designed the invitations, guest list, and seating chart with malicious precision. The night of the gala, held at the museum Isabelle had helped renovate, was a masterpiece of public humiliation. I placed Gabriel at a table with our most conservative, morally rigid investors and their wives. I seated Isabelle at a distant table with the city's most notorious gossip columnists and the wife of the man whose firm was being bought out, a woman known for her icy, probing conversations. I, however, was the star. I gave a speech, not a fiery indictment, but a poignant, heartfelt tribute to loyalty, partnership, and the unseen structures that hold beautiful things together. I spoke of late nights building something lasting, of trust that required no grand gestures. I never mentioned them, but every word was a mirror held up to their betrayal. The audience, our entire world, gave me a standing ovation. Gabriel's smile was a rictus of pain. Isabelle's eyes were bright with furious, trapped tears. Then I brought a date. Not a romantic interest, but Chloe, my sharp-eyed assistant. I introduced her to everyone as the person who really keeps the foundation from crumbling. I was attentive, respectful, and it painted a public picture of a man moving forward, surrounded by loyalty. Isabelle and Gabriel were frozen artifacts of the past, awkwardly orbiting a narrative that had left them behind. The ride home was a silent, glacial tomb. In our driveway, Isabelle finally erupted. "Was that your plan? To humiliate me? To make me look like a discarded accessory?" I turned off the engine, the interior light casting harsh shadows. "Humiliate you? I was celebrating our company, our history. You seemed uncomfortable. Is everything okay with Gabriel? He looked stressed." The feigned concern was a needle dipped in venom. She stared at me, and for the first time I saw not guilt or anger, but dawning, horrifying comprehension. The scales were falling from her eyes. The perfect, passionate escape she'd engineered was revealing itself as a flimsy house of cards, and the wind she now felt blowing through it carried the cold, logical scent of my cologne. She didn't answer. She got out and walked into the house, her heels clicking a frantic, retreating rhythm on the pavement. I sat in the dark car. Phase 3 was complete. The financial noose was tight. Their social capital was spent. The psychological alliance between them was fracturing under the weight of reality I engineered. They were no longer partners in crime. They were two terrified individuals starting to realize that the lifeboat they'd jumped into together was sinking. And the man they'd left behind on the steady, sturdy ship wasn't waving for them to come back. He was calmly preparing to sail over the spot where they
The
would
collapse,
go under.
when it came, was not an explosion. It was a silent, structural failure. The foundation they had undermined gave way, and they were swallowed by the cracks they themselves had created. It began with Apex. The temporary loan Gabriel had taken from the client escrow account was discovered. Not by me. I merely adjusted the audit trail so that our most meticulous junior accountant, a by-the-book woman I'd secretly promoted, would find it. She did, and horrified, she took it directly to the compliance committee, bypassing Gabriel entirely. The scandal was immediate and lethal. Client funds were sacrosanct. The board, comprised of the same conservative investors I'd seated with Gabriel at the gala, voted unanimously for his immediate suspension and a forensic audit. The news leaked to the press. Gabriel wasn't just ousted, he was radioactive. The Ferrari was repossessed. The penthouse, mortgaged to the hilt, went into foreclosure. I met him for the last time in the sterile, empty Apex conference room. He was a ghost of himself, his charisma burned away, leaving only ash and desperation. "You," he rasped, his eyes bloodshot. "You did this. You set me up." I placed my hands flat on the table, the picture of calm reason. "I did my job, Gabriel. I protected the company. You were the one who funneled money to a shell company. You were the one who stole from a client. The spreadsheets don't lie. They just record the decisions you made." "I did it for us, for our future," he shouted, the hollow justification echoing in the empty room. "Your future," I corrected quietly, "built on my present. The numbers are clear. You diverted over $800,000 to Elysian Ventures. I have the full report for the prosecutors. I'd recommend you focus on your defense." The word prosecutors turned him pale. He wasn't just losing his career, he was facing prison. He lunged across the table, grabbing my shirt. "You tell them it was a loan. You back me up. We're brothers." I didn't flinch. I just looked down at his hands, then back into his eyes. Brothers don't steal from each other's vaults, Gabriel, and they certainly don't steal each other's wives. Let go of me. The sheer, icy finality in my voice broke him. He released me, sinking back into his chair, sobbing, ugly, raw sounds of a man who had gambled everything and lost. Isabelle's end was quieter, but no less complete. With Gabriel's money and influence gone, the fantasy evaporated. The anonymous shell corporation, my shell corporation, completed the buyout of her rival design firm, then immediately dissolved it, liquidating its assets. Her professional landscape was now a desert. She came to me in my home office, the one she'd designed to be a sanctuary. She looked small, dressed not in designer finery, but in simple jeans and a sweater. The performance was over. "Did you ruin him?" she asked, her voice devoid of its former music. "He ruined himself," I said, not looking up from my computer. "I simply provided the ledger." "And me? Was I just another line item in your ledger?" Finally, I turned to face her. "You were the collateral damage of your own choices, Isabelle. You traded a partnership for a sponsorship. When the sponsor went bankrupt, you were left with neither." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. I loved him. You loved what he represented: escape, validation, a life less ordinary. I stood up, walking to the window. But the ordinary life was the one with a foundation. You helped design this house, but you forgot to check the blueprints for the load-bearing walls. You tore one out, the whole structure came down. What do I do now? The question was a whisper. That's no longer my concern, I said, my voice gentle but absolute. The divorce papers are with my lawyer. Given the dissipation of marital assets due to your extracurriculars, the settlement will reflect that. You'll get enough to start over, somewhere else. She left without another word. I heard her car drive away from our home, from the life she helped build and then tried to abandon. She moved to a small city in the Southwest, a place with cheap light and no memory. I heard she works in a high-end home goods store, advising others on aesthetics for a commission, a fitting end for a curator of surfaces. As for me, I sold Apex Consulting. The scandal had tarnished the name, but the underlying business, the systems I'd built, was rock solid. A private equity firm paid a premium for it, valuing the infrastructure over the brand. The money was obscene. I took a year off. I traveled to places with stark, simple geometry, the deserts of Oman, the ice fields of Patagonia, the minimalist lines of Japanese monasteries. I didn't write a memoir. I didn't need to. The story was over. Eventually, I returned and used the capital to found a new kind of firm, not a consultancy, but a foundation, the Veritas Fund. We invest in sustainable, ethical businesses and fund financial literacy programs for communities left behind by the kind of greed that consumed Gabriel. We audit hope. We build foundations that can't be looted. One evening, at a charity fundraiser for the fund, a woman approached me. She was the architect who had designed the new Veritas headquarters, a building of stunning, transparent integrity. Her name was Ilara. She had a calm gaze and a smile that didn't seem rehearsed. "Your foundation is doing remarkable work," she said. "It feels honest." That's the idea, to build something where the structure matches the brochure. She laughed, a sound like clear water, a radical concept. We talked late into the night, not about grand visions or escaping the past, but about materials, about light, about the quiet mathematics of beauty that doesn't need to shout. It was the beginning of a conversation, not a performance. I drove home alone that night, but the silence felt different. It wasn't the silence of a hollowed-out life. It was the silence of a blank page after a long, difficult, but necessary story had finally been told.